So, first of all, I want to thank everyone for being here. I thank, and on behalf of the Visual Arts Program faculty, the School of Arts and Humanities, and of course the Art Gallery in Stockton University. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-presenter today, Vicki Gold-Levi. Vicki Gold-Levi, born in Atlantic City, is a picture editor and a co-author of Atlantic City, 125 Years of Ocean Madness. Live and Be Well, a celebration of Yiddish culture in America, Cuba Style, graphics from the golden age of design, Times Square Style, and is co-founder of the Atlantic City Historical Museum, and a historical consultant to HBO's Boardwalk Empire, and co-curator of the Atlantic City Experience in Jim Whalen Boardwalk Hall in Atlantic City. And so please join me in welcoming Vicki Gold-Levi. Thanks.
Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for joining in today for the Al Gold Memorial Lecture. And special thanks to my co-speaker and friend, Wendel White, for helping me format my first webinar. And thanks for all the designers, IT folk, and the Stockton Art Gallery for making this webinar a reality. A word about my subject, which are the notables and notorious from Atlantic City. There is a saying, if you come from AC, that you have sand in your shoes, which means you are connected in a very special way to the shore. While conducting many years of Atlantic City research, I came across so many notables and a few notorious personalities from our streets, beach, and boardwalk. During the pandemic, I decided to really start to collect who these people are. Today is just a small preview. I have over 150 names so far, and I plan to do a website at a later date hosted by the Atlantic City Free Public Library. So let's get started. Since this is the Al Gold Memorial Lecture, I will start with Al Gold. My dad was the first chief photographer of Atlantic City from 1939 to 1964. And this is one of his well-known photos of horses on the beach. Disney World did a large oil painting of this photo for their boardwalk themed hotel. And a beloved picture by my family. This is my dad giving Marilyn Monroe a smooch. She was one of his favorite photo subjects, and she was the Grand Marshal of the Miss America Parade, and he was one of the photographers who was with her during her stay in Atlantic City. And Marilyn Monroe was the Grand Marshal in 1952 and led the Miss America Parade on the boardwalk. Next. Jacob Persky lived in Atlantic City and was a noted artist, photographer, and master etcher of great skill. He was the personal portrait artist and photographer of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and Roosevelt considered him his favorite photographer. And Jacob Persky was always welcome at the White House, and here he is showing his etching from a news clip to FDR. And this is the actual etching that was very famous during FDR's campaign. Persky and his son Erwin had a photography studio in the boardwalk near the Ritz Hotel. And after Jacob Persky's death, his other son Leon continued to photograph FDR. Here is his color portrait of the president. Leon also photographed Truman, Kennedy, and LBJ. Persky's granddaughter Janet is an artist living in New York today. Next. Going into the sports world, now we have John Henry Pop Lloyd. He lived in Atlantic City much of his life, and he played for the Negro Leagues, including the Backrack Giants and the Johnson All-Stars, named after the political kingpin Mickey Johnson. The Johnson team is shown here, and Pop Lloyd is on his far right. Now, he was considered the greatest baseball shortstop in history, and he was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1977. He died in 1964 at 79. Now, New Jersey State Senator Frank S. Farley dedicated the Pop Lloyd Stadium for kids in Atlantic City. And next, Joe DiMaggio, a beloved baseball great, played center field for the Yankees and had a long history with Atlantic City. Seen here hanging out on the boardwalk with comedian Jack Leonard. And Joe DiMaggio was stationed in Atlantic City during World War II when AC was taken over by the Army for turning hotels into barracks and also training. Here in uniform, seated at the far left, is DiMaggio, and also at the table in uniform is the movie star Donald O'Connor. He was stationed here as well. The other people at the table are 500 Club owner Paul Skinny D'Amata and his wife Betty Jane. And the Irish pub on St. James Place was where DiMaggio loved to stay in the 80s and 90s when he came to Atlantic City for boxing events. He was close friends with the owners, Richard and Kathy Burke. Next. Red Klotz lived in Margate, New Jersey, and was the owner and coach of the Washington Generals basketball team from 1953 to 1989. And this is a book that he that was all about the legend of Red Klotz. And he was the coach of the Washington Generals, and the Generals were the team that became famous for traveling the world and always losing to the Harlem Globetrotters. And Red Klotz was known as the biggest loser who ever lived, as a humorous moniker, but the most beloved man. Red himself played basketball for 60 years and died in 2004 at 93. Next. Arthur Dorrington hailed from Canada and became the first African-American hockey player in the National Hockey League. He played for the Atlantic City Seagulls on the Eastern Hockey League from 1954 to 1956. And he's shown here with the Atlantic City Seagulls, which played in Convention Hall. After he retired, he became the Atlantic City softball commissioner, and he created the Art Dorrington Ice Hockey for children of low-income families to learn the game of hockey. He died in 2017 at 87. Next. Chris Ford, born in Atlantic City in 1949 and graduated from Holy Spirit. He was a professional basketball player, a shooting guard for the Detroit Pistons and the Boston Celtics. Ford is credited for scoring the NBA's first three-point shot for the Celtics in 1979. And Ford could be seen in this fun basketball film, The Fish That Saved Pittsburgh. Next. Pedro Albani, seen here with an accordion, was an Italian musician and composer with a famous rumba band. He played local venues and hotels and was very popular in the round the world room at the President Hotel. Mr. Albani wrote the popular song in his day, the Atlantic City Rumba. Next. Frank Sinatra was born in Hoboken, New Jersey, and as a young man was the lead crooner in the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra. He then moved on to the Harry James Band in 1939. He's seated here second from the right next to Harry James on Steel Pier. And a little nepotism here. As a youngster, I had my own radio show on WMID with Al Owens, and somehow I was selected to celebrate Sinatra's 10th year in show business. By then, he was a solo performer, often doing several shows daily on Steel Pier and other famous entertainment venues. His fans sent him postcards from all over the country to celebrate his 10th year in show business. And Sinatra was one of the few performers who played Steel Pier, the 500 Club seen here, and later some of the casinos. He had a close personal relationship with 500 Club owner Skinny D'Amato. Sinatra gave a special concert in Convention Hall to benefit the Atlantic City Medical Center, and they named a wing at the hospital after him. Next. Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis started off as single entertainers, and seen here in this ad at the 500 Club, where it shows that Dean was a crooner and Jerry had a pantomime act, but they connected on stage with such great comedy, and the rest is show business history. And Martin and Lewis continue to play the 500 Club and also in New York at the Copa and all over the country. They went on to be one of the most successful comedy teams in movie history. Next. The fabulous singer Nina Simone, famed throughout the world, first used the name Nina Simone in Atlantic City. She was a concert pianist and first started to sing the first time using her famous new name and at the at the Midtown Bar on Pacific Avenue in Atlantic City in 1954. Next. Dawn Nickerson graduated from Atlantic City High School in 1956 and went on to be an actress and singer on Broadway. She was featured in the Broadway shows Do Re Mi and Subways Are for Sleeping. Dawn starred in the TV series Harry's Girls, and Dawn's father, Bert Nickerson, played the saxophone and clarinet and also sang with Alex Bartha's house orchestra on Steel Pier. And also in the Alex Bartha Orchestra was Ziggy Elman, who was raised in Atlantic City and whose fabulous trumpet playing after Bartha led him to go with the Benny Goodman Band, where he recorded his famous song, When the Angels Sing, and later with Tommy Dorsey. And keeping it all in the family, Dawn's son, Richard L. Fox, is an assistant movie producer, an assistant TV director and movie director, and associate producer with 90 productions under his belt. Next. Rosalind Cash was born in Atlantic City and graduated from Atlantic City High School. She became a well-known actor in theater, movies, and television. A member of the famous Negro Ensemble Theater Company in New York City, she also appeared in movies like Omega Man, Clute, and the Centaurians, as well as many others. Her many TV appearances included a recurring role in General Hospital. And Rosalind loved Atlantic City and seen here with a friend in the now historic Chicken Bone Beach in a photo taken by John W. Mosley. Rosalind's siblings were also distinguished. Her late brother, John Cash, was a well-respected colonel in the U.S. Army, worked at the Pentagon, and wrote 2 books about the military. Her late sister, Helen Cash, worked in TV and received an Emmy for a Gil Noble show, Like It Is. She then joined the New York State Council on the Arts and spearheaded their special arts diversity program. Her brother, Robert, was a human rights specialist and worked in the New York Mayor's office for many years. Next. The late actor James Avery was born in Atlantic City and moved at a young age. He was born in Virginia and moved at a young age to Atlantic City, and he was featured in many TV shows and films. And he's best known for his role as Uncle Phil, the beloved Uncle Phil in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Next. Sammy Davis Jr. was a beloved performer and friend to Atlantic City. He performed at the 500 Club, seen here with Frank Sinatra. His original act was with his father and uncle in the Will Maston Trio. And Davis was so popular and talented that he grew off on his own as a solo performer and then often played at the Club Harlem on Kentucky Avenue in Atlantic City. And he could be spotted with his pals at the beach. And he also participated in city events like the Easter Parade, where he was the parade marshal riding along with Mayor Lazaro. And his mom, Elvira Sanchez, known as Baby Sanchez, was a former dancer and a popular bartender across the street from the Club Harlem at Gracie's Little Belmont in Atlantic City. Here he is singing to her, Hey There, on the Mike Douglas Show. Next. Suzette Charles is an American singer and actress. She was Miss New Jersey in 1983 and replaced Vanessa Williams as Miss America in 1984. Suzette is the second Jewish Miss America and has lived off and on in Mays Landing, but often shows up for events in Atlantic City. A graduate of Temple University, she now resides in New York City. And Suzette is a recording star and appeared on stage with Stevie Wonder, Joel Gray, Frank Sinatra, and others. And she could be seen in many TV shows as featured here with Sammy Davis Jr. Next. We know the famous Rockettes in Radio City Music Hall in New York. Everybody knows their precision dancing. But Atlantic City High School graduate and dancer Sandy Harvey was a Rockette from 1958 to 1962. She later wrote children's books and had a dance studio. Next. Kate Schindel, a Brigantine native, went to Northwestern University and participated in Miss America as Miss Illinois. She won Miss America in 1998 with her dynamic singing and her platform as an AIDS advocate. And I have to add, I was one of the judges. Kate went on to be an author, Broadway actor in shows like Jekyll and Hyde, and she played in Legally Blonde, Wonderland, Dracula the Musical, starred in Fun Home, and the national tour of Cabaret. She played Sally Bowles. And today, Kate, while still singing and recording, is the twice elected president of the Actors Equity Association. Next. Tom Madden, an American author, speechwriter, and public relations expert, and founder of the international public relations firm Transmedia Group. Born in Philadelphia, he moved after college to Atlantic City and was a reporter on the Press of Atlantic City and later the Philadelphia Inquirer. His career moved on and he was PR director of ABC TV and promoted to vice president, and later he was vice president of NBC before he started the Transmedia Group. And as an NBC Atlantic City side note, Herb Schlosser, seen here, was from Atlantic City and was president of NBC from 1974 to 78. And he was the force between the Saturday Night Live show. He died in 2021 at 95. Next, and getting back to Tom Madden, he authored 5 books, including Spin Man on the Topsy-Turvy World of Public Relations. And Madden's dad, Bill Madden, was a master violinist, and after a stint with the Cleveland Symphony Orchestra, he became the musical director of the Tramer Hotel in Atlantic City and director of the Atlantic City Festival Orchestra. Tom's brother Don was also a great cartoonist and appeared monthly in Playboy magazine. Next. June Cross is an assistant professor of journalism at Columbia University and a Peabody and Emmy Award-winning documentary film producer and director of many films. And born in New York City and the author of the best-selling memoir, Secret Daughter, and co-director and producer of the documentary of the same name, Cross is a mixed-race daughter and was sent to live with a loving Black family in Atlantic City, while still nourishing the love between visits with her mother, Norma Green, who was an aspiring actress. June attended Atlantic City High School and ended up going to Harvard. June has an accomplished career, once working at PBS News and Frontline, where she produced 8 documentaries. And her late father was James Cross, seen on the left and known professionally as Stump, of the famous African-American vaudeville team Stump and Stumpy that appeared in several movies. And June's mother later married the actor Larry Storch of X Troop TV fame. June often visited her mother and stepfather in Hollywood. Her mother died of cancer, and Larry Storch died recently in New York City at 99, and June was often by his side for years. Next. Scott Rosenfeld is one of Hollywood's successful independent producers. Today he lives between Margate, New Jersey, and Los Angeles. His father and grandfather also lived at the shore. And some of the famous movies he produced are Home Alone, and he launched Julia Roberts' career in Mystic Pizza. He produced several other films, including the current critical thinking of John Leguizamo. Currently, Rosenfeld is developing a film about the 500 Club. Next. Russell Patterson, a personal favorite of mine, was a legendary American cartoonist, illustrator, and scenic designer. Patterson's Art Deco magazine illustrations helped to develop the idea of the flapper in the 20s and 30s. He was born in 1893 in Omaha, Nebraska, but had close ties with Atlantic City and lived there and died there in Brigantine, New Jersey in 1977 at 83. He was so versatile and talented and worked in print, movies, theater, and magazines. And Patterson designed covers for many magazines, including the early Life, Post, Judge, and Valley Hill. This charming Miss America cover was designed for the early Life as an example of his artistic prowess. And Patterson was a beauty expert and judged Miss America and later Miss Universe for many years. Here he is judging Miss America. And his famed newspaper cartoon strip called Mamie ran in syndication for years. And Patterson worked for Paramount and 20th Century Fox designing, and here created Shirley Temple's popular polka dress for her movie Baby Takes a Bow. And kids all over the country wanted this dress. And Patterson also designed WAC uniforms, and as well as the see-through umbrella. Patterson was so talented and worked in many creative venues. His daughter, Rochelle Patterson, was a former model, and today she's an animal rights person and advocates for people in need. She lives in Atlantic City and continues to honor her talented dad. Next. Norman Joseph Woodland, born in Atlantic City in 1921, and along with Bernard Silver was the inventor of the modern barcode. As a Boy Scout, he learned Morse code, the spark that would ignite his invention. He claimed the idea for the barcode came to him while he was doodling in the sand in the beach. Woodland was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame, and he died at 91 in 1963. Next. The renowned painter Jacob Lawrence was born in Atlantic City in 1917. He was known for his portrayal of African-American historical subjects. His most famous paintings was the Migration series in 1941. Lawrence died in Seattle, Washington in 2000 at 83 years. Next. Kadir Nelson, author, painter, and illustrator, best known for his striking paintings on the cover of the New Yorker. Nelson was born in Washington, D.C., but grew up in Atlantic City. Nelson was commissioned to paint a portrait to honor Henrietta Lacks, shown here, and was acquired jointly by the Smithsonian and the National Portrait Gallery and the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Next, and this is Madam Sarah Spencer Washington. She was born in 1899 in West Virginia and studied chemistry at Columbia University. In 1913, she opened up a small hairdressing shop in Atlantic City. And by 1919, Washington founded the Apex News and Hair Company and became a cosmetics entrepreneur. She was able to grow her business into an empire, and the Apex empire included 11 different beauty schools in the United States and foreign countries, and Washington won many awards and accolades. Next. Her grandson, Royston Scott, did a multi-award winning documentary on Madam Washington, and aside from her business beauty, and as one of America's first Black millionaires, she did so much for her local community. And the Atlantic City Arts Foundation recently created this mural in her honor on a building at Atlantic Avenue and Martin Luther King Boulevard. Next. Nelson C. Johnson was a lawyer and a New Jersey Superior Court judge and a writer. Born in Hamilton, New Jersey, and raised in Atlantic County, he gained national fame by authoring the book Boardwalk Empire, The Birth, High Times, and Corruption of Atlantic City, that was later turned into a 5-year HBO series by the same name. The story of political crime boss Nucky Johnson and his city. And Johnson also authored The North Side, African Americans in the Creation of Atlantic City, as well as other books, including his latest book, and Darrow's Nightmare, the forgotten story of America's most famous trial lawyer. Next. Now, I have shown you some of Atlantic City's notables. Here are a few of the notorious. In May of 1929, the Atlantic City Conference was a historic summit of organized crime leaders in the United States. It was held in Atlantic City, and it was said that they caucused with their pants rolled up in the ocean shoreline for security so nobody could hear them. Atlantic City political crime boss was the host, and amongst the most notorious gangster was Al Capone, seen here in this photo on the right, on the left of Nucky Johnson, and Nucky Johnson's on the right. When Capone left the shore at the end of the conference, he was arrested in Philadelphia for carrying a handgun and spent a year in jail. And in the HBO series, Boardwalk Empire, Steve Buscemi played Nucky Johnson. Next. Atlantic City turned a blind eye to prohibition and later illegal gambling, which was practiced at Babette's nightclub, the Bath and Turf, Club Harlem, 500 Club, and others. And in the early 1950s, Tennessee U.S. Senator Estes Kefauver held television hearings throughout the country to investigate organized crime. Nucky Johnson was called to testify. And finally, illegal gambling was closed down in Atlantic City until legal gambling was approved again in 1979. Next. George Lincoln Rockwell, disgraced founder of the American Nazi Party, was born in Illinois in 1918, but later moved to Ventnor City and went to Atlantic City High School. He admired Adolf Hitler as it was a confirmed racist and anti-Semite. And Rockwell wrote his radical book, This Time the World, and described his time in Ventnor and attending Atlantic City High School. And Nazis were arrested during a scuffle near Convention Hall at the 1964 Democratic Convention. One Nazi held a sign charging Johnson as a traitor. Distinguished delegates threw punches and heavy blows at the Nazis. Rockwell was not present at this event, and he was later assassinated in 1967. The irony of this low point in our local history is that so many survivors of the Holocaust lived in South Jersey. In fact, Stockton University created a digital archive of the survivors, and at least 1,500 just live in Atlantic County alone. Next, I would like to end my talk on a positive note with the notable Vera King Farris, the third president of Stockton College, the first female African-American president of the New Jersey Public College, and one of the first in the nation. Miss Farris was born in Atlantic City in 1938, a scientist with a doctorate in zoology from the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. Farris established one of the nation's first Holocaust resource centers and the first master's program in Holocaust and Genocide Studies. She also endowed a chair in the department in her mother's name, who inspired her to do something of the Holocaust when she was a youngster. Thanks again for joining me in this discovery of the notables and the notorious of Atlantic City. I hope there were a few surprises here for you. Although I have many names already on file and will use them later in my website, if you think you want to submit any names, messenger me on Facebook under Vicki Gold-Levi. Have a wonderful day and enjoy the talents of Wendel White next. Thank you and goodbye.
Thanks, Vicki. Thank you very much. Really nice. I got to come back over here. There we go. There we go. I thought for today I would just concentrate on looking at some of my work that has taken place within southern New Jersey for the most part. And look at that. I thought that would be a particularly good way to connect to some of the work that Vicki was thinking about and talking about in relationship to Atlantic City. So I'm just going to go through a few of these and try to talk about these projects a little bit. They really start with a project that began in 1989 called Small Towns, Black Lives, in which I visited and photographed in historically African American communities throughout the United States, throughout southern New Jersey, later throughout the United States, but for our purposes throughout southern New Jersey. And at the very beginning, I met people in a town called Whitesboro, not in any way connected to me or my name, but this is Miss Gladys Spalding, and we had this was a wonderful conversation that we had in her home, and her home was very close to what had once been the one-room school inside Whitesboro. And early on, before I knew that I was going to be involved in any of these kinds of projects, before I even knew this project was going to be a project, I was also sort of taking notes. And so you'll excuse the audio quality, but I was using a little micro cassette recorder, and this is the conversation that I was having at that time in 1989 with Mrs. Spalding. And it's about the experience that the students had, the Black students had, when they left the local Black school and went to an integrated school for high school, because there were only integrated high schools.
There was a time when my husband went to school, they were talking about civics. And the teacher, all the teachers were white. And he said, "Oh, that doesn't mean anything to you'll never get a job."
Right.
And it was that negative that stopped a lot of it. Some of them just didn't stop. They just kept on going.
Right.
Until the daylight sat up.
Right.
Because I can think of one fellow that he was very good at math. And he just walked on away with it and went on to college and also went teaching.
Right.
And they actually even just long before they started taking good teachers.
And so that was part of also building a website that provided some information or background to viewers about what my experiences were like, because gradually the website became a place to reveal something about how I was building these stories, how I was building these images. This is a photograph of the school that I took actually a year later, that's just a few doors down the street from Mrs. Spalding's house. But this project was primarily portraits of people in various communities. This is Woody Armstrong in the barbershop that was attached to the side of his house, and Mrs. Lackey, Audrey Lackey's real estate office, which had only opened about a year or so before I encountered it and met her. She was the only, at the time, she was the only African-American realtor in all of Cape May County. And so this community had this very long history, but at the same time was really very apart from many of the surrounding communities. And this is what started me thinking about and encountering these separated communities. There's one town in South Jersey that's actually incorporated, so we can really call it a town, and that's Lawnside. But all the other towns that I photographed are really settlements within larger municipalities, so they're not self-governed. But the way New Jersey is organized, they still feel like towns, aside from the fact that they are separated from the surrounding communities. Many of them, like Whitesboro, have their own post offices. So a lot of places have post offices that aren't really towns. Galloway is my favorite. There are several places that have post offices, but there is no Galloway post office, right? So there was for a short time, and then it went away. So there's no, and so our sense of organization is really interesting and complex in New Jersey. This is Michelle Washington Wilson, a wonderful storyteller. Number of people at Stockton know her and are familiar with her. And I thought this was also something important that I added into the project in general, because it added something more of the agency within Black communities, the way, and Audrey Lackey represents that, and so does Mr. Armstrong. But this, I thought, was a wonderful story that would, reflect something of the good activities and memories within the Black community. This also reflects something of the kinds of experiences in that this time I have a little bit better recording device, and I'm riding around the town. She's essentially giving me a tour of the town. So we're in her car riding around the town, and she'll stop and point things out along the way.
And that's Miss Lil's house. And Miss Lil, on Halloween, she would turn her lights out and pretend she wasn't home.
Not giving out any candy.
I know. So this one year, we was like, all right, Miss Lil, we know you in there. Come on, open up the door. This is my godparents' house with the stand. That's how they became so wealthy. Right. They had the little ice cream stand. And see, remember the juke joint was here on the corner.
Right.
So they sold barbecue.
So everybody would come out. Right.
Yeah, and ice cream. And then, the people would come over to the juke joint. So anyway, getting back to Miss Lil on this particular Halloween, we had it with her with this, turn out the lights thing. We knew she was there. Her car was in the driveway. So me and my girlfriend, we're getting a little fresh out there. We're like, come on, Miss Lil. We know you're in there, Miss Lil. Open up the door. Give us some candy. It's trick or treat. It only comes once a year, Miss Lil. Open up the door. So the next thing you know, it's like 12 or 15 kids in this group of trick or treaters, and somebody says, "Hey, y'all, Miss Lil let her dogs out." So then we said, "Oh no, Miss Lil, please don't let your dogs out on us. We're just little children. We just want trick or treat." And then somebody said, "It's not a dog. It's a pig." And Miss Lil had these huge hogs, and the pigs had gotten loose. So here they are. Here's all these little children with trick-or-treat bags, and all those, in the 60s, you get those bruised pears and those ginger snap cookies would scrape the skin off the old bruised pears and those dried, and the pigs were like, all right, it's trick-or-treat, my favorite night. Candy corn everywhere. So we scattered. And of course, me and my girlfriend, being that we were the ringleaders and we were up at the door, the first shall become last.
Right.
So the other kids, they're heading for the hills, and we're still pressed up against the door. Please, Miss Lil, please open the door. Don't let your pigs out on us. So we take off running, and I'm wearing my Aunt Geraldine's new Easter hat for Halloween. And it was this big wide brim hat that had silk flowers on it. And this was like in '64. So silk flowers were like a big thing. And so as I'm running from the pig, the wind velocity grabs the hat and blows it off my head back on the driveway, right into the face of the pig. So I was mean and bad enough to take the hat, but I wasn't bad enough to face the pig. So I said, being the diplomat that I've always been, please, somebody's gotta go back and get Geraldine's hat. So Dolores Austin, my hero, runs back in a defiant moment that defines her life and grabs the hat out of the face of the pig and snatches it up and saved my life.
I should add to this, we were driving very slowly, and Michelle Wilson is a literacy coordinator for various programs, so consequently a good storyteller. And then some of the other images are about civic life in various communities, rededication of the Civil War, cemetery site, a Black resort community. This is an entirely summer community. Everybody that owned homes here, these were all second homes. Nobody lived here year round, and so it was really that sort of true resort community, named after, known as Morris Beach, named after Jenny Morris, who was an undertaker in Philadelphia, who purchased all this property, subdivided it, and created these homes for everyone. Mount Pisgah, and this is in Lawnside, the one incorporated community and one of the older churches. Buried in their cemetery is the female preacher, Jarena Lee, the first woman ordained to minister in the AME Church. And then this is the Port Republic cemetery just out here behind the college, in which I started to do some archival work, and I started to gather information about this community, this Black community that had once been there and then disappeared. And it led to other kinds of research, other kinds of archival work. And within all of that, I came across this, started to include material that was not sort of photographs of the world, but photographs of other documents and other images. And so this is an 1872 map that describes the cemetery site, which was attached to an AME church. And here we see a photograph of the students at the Portland Public School. And Portland Public was and still is too small to have a segregated school, a separate school. And so this was always interesting to me, this notion that the way in which segregation played out in southern New Jersey had a lot also to do with economics and scale. Was it worthwhile creating a separate, and it played out in lots of different ways. Some places there was, in Swedesboro, a separate floor for Black students, and it was the basement, and then white students were on the first and second floor, until eventually they built a separate school. And so there were all kinds of iterations of segregation, but here we have essentially an integrated school in about 1910, 1911, in a community that has, notoriously not been diverse at all. That school, and thinking about all the other schools that I photographed, led to the project called Schools for the Colored, and I began photographing schools from New Jersey, from the Atlantic Ocean, this is Indiana Avenue School, to the Mississippi River in East St. Louis, all in the north, though. And so I was really interested in segregation in the north. I became interested in that. And I started to apply a visual technique. In the photograph of the kids, I had sort of screened them out from the surrounding area based on W.E.B. Du Bois' passage in the beginning of The Souls of Black Folk, in which he talked about a school experience. And Du Bois was in an integrated school in New England, but at one point an event took place in which he was, spurred by the white students, and he then started to feel like he existed outside their world and could see their world through a veil. And so that became a way to, for me, create a visual device to think about these Black schools as existing in the world, but also separated from the rest of the world by a veil. That was Cape May. This is Freehold. Sorry, I should have said a couple of these along the way. This one, by the way, is Bordentown School. It's the only boarding school, segregated boarding school in a northern state, and it was in Bordentown, New Jersey. It's a huge facility. Cape May, Freehold. This is Manitou Park. A friend of mine who's an architectural historian found out that this building was sold by a company in Philadelphia with the marketing tagline that the building is made from 100% asbestos. So it won't burn down. It's not going to burn down. Marshalltown or Mannington near Salem. Newtonville, Trenton. And we had this discussion earlier today in class as to whether or not places like Trenton and Princeton are North Jersey, South Jersey. There is a central Jersey, but if you go far enough north, Trenton and Princeton are south. So I sort of took a little license there. This is the Whitesboro School again, now that it's, well, a number of years later, but it was being renovated and turned into a community center. So I revisited it, and this is Woodbury. I did a commission project in Salem on a project called 7 Steps to Freedom. It was put together by Jim Turk, who had been the curator of history at the New Jersey State Museum, and at the time he was the director or coordinator of culture and heritage in Salem. And he put together this program of looking at the different sites in Salem that were connected to the process that led from enslavement to freedom. And today, still, you can go and there's a cell phone tour that you can take. And so you can stop at each of these locations, and it has a phone number that you call, and you will actually hear an actor performing the story of that particular site. It's a wonderful project, and he's not there anymore, but I did these photographs for that. This is Colonel Johnson's house. And this is, to me, this photograph and the next photograph are the most important for me about this story, because in this house, there was an enslaved woman who was living. And then across the street and up the block a little bit, but on the same street, you can see these two homes from each other. This is the Goodwin sisters' home, which was for a long time the only Network to Freedom certified Underground Railroad site in New Jersey, right? And Goodwin sisters were white Quaker women, and there are extensive letters between them and William Still in Philadelphia, and their passaging. They're moving people from that had come across the Delaware River or the Bay, sort of, into basically Fort Ellsworth, then up into Salem, and then they would help them make their way to Philadelphia. And this is one of the spots where they would have come across into the southern part of Salem County. This is actually the building is now the Salem County Historical Society, but the center building, the green door, was the location where John Rock started to study dentistry before he studied law, and then eventually became the first African-American admitted to argue cases before the Supreme Court. And this was a camp meeting site, Thomas Oliver's camp meeting site, where many of the abolitionist activities took place. All of these mostly in and around the Salem area. And then the project that I am currently working on and have been working on now for quite some time is the Manifest Project. It has many different parts to it. And right now I'm working on a part that has taken me outside of New Jersey. But these are just a few images that I did inside New Jersey early on. And these are all from, and I sort of went back and forth thinking about what I would show. These are all from Cape May County Museum. And this is a flag which I think was attributed to having been flown or on the Monitor. I'm not sure that that's absolutely the full story, but it was, a Civil War era battle flag in their collection. And then this is not in their collection, but when I was photographing, they made arrangements for another collection to bring this Klan hood. Actually, I had the whole outfit, but this hood is what I photographed. It's a woman's hood for the Klan, for a woman who lived in the area and belonged to the Ocean City chapter of the Klan. One of the things to remember in New Jersey in the 1920s, like 1925, the official rolls of the Klan rose to about 50,000 people from one end of the state to the other. So there were often conventions in Atlantic City, and it was just a very open activity for many different reasons, including the traditionally historic issues with race, but also anxieties over new immigrants coming in with Catholic backgrounds to them. That used to be not allowed, now it's allowed. And then I thought the scope of things, and I should say the organization that had that was happy to let me make a photograph. I had heard about it, and they were willing to, with the one caveat that I not identify the organization whose collection it was in, because there are still family members for that person living in the area, right? So they didn't want to deal with that. Anyway, this is a Bible that was owned by an enslaved man who became free in Cape May County. So that's the whole, in that one in those few images, it represents a lot of what Manifest has been for me. Both the sort of the pain of oppression, and yet also the elevation of agency and self-definition, self-determination within the African American community. So all of that has been important, and maybe one of the most important, and I'll sort of talk over this a little bit as we get to the end, is the Paul Robeson House in Princeton. And so put it in South Jersey, it's technically 609, so and I did a project for them in which they were at the beginning, and they're much further along now. They were clearing out the house of all of the things that had been sort of left behind. They're creating this sort of archaeological dig in the house. They're going to turn it into a center. And they brought a lot of those materials to me to photograph them. So I made photographs of them with the idea that for about a month or so, we projected at night, every night, the images were projected back onto the house. So this is the side of the Paul Robeson house, which is right across the street from the back of the Art Center, the Princeton Art Center. So we were able to set up the projector in the Art Center and project it right across the street to the Paul Robeson house. So these are the objects that were there. And it's mostly just background sound. Well, roll back. It was 17. It says I have it at the end. I have the exact date. October, November 17. I just love all the shadows. Yeah, October 20 to November 25. Thank you.